Welcome, everyone, to the movie Potluck. Tonight, I have a bunch of guests, and hopefully, we will have some really interesting conversation. I'm going to skip a little bit of the normal intro that I do, and I'll tell you why. I almost had an odd existential crisis as I was doing research for the ways that I believed movies change our society, which is the title of our podcast tonight. Movies that have changed or influenced society. And I'll tell you sort of what that was all about. I was looking for movies and I found a lot that did change the way that we think about things, the way that we react to things. But more often than not, I came across things that we latched onto and then they became trendy and part of the zeitgeist. And instead of it being an actual movie that inspired social change, it was society changing and movies reacting to it. Now, that is not to say that there aren't some movies out there that have interesting cross sections with the way that we merchandise and then they become sort of an entity to themselves. Although it's not a movie, if you look at Baby Yoda, I mean, that sold The Mandalorian for Disney as much as any of the really awesome writing in it. So the sort of at this crossroad that I came to, I also came up with this idea that, you know, we haven't had a lot of movies that have created dynamic social change. But I am going to open this up to my guests and ask them what their opinions are and how they think movies have changed our society, or more, maybe more focused, just our culture. So I'm first going to introduce Kinte. Kinte, how are you tonight?
I'm doing really good. A lot of trying things going on in my life, but I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to have this conversation.
Well, welcome to the show, and I hope that we are a good distraction from your regular drama. Hopefully, we'll provide you with some different drama. And Tori, how are you tonight?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm feeling better. So I'm not dying anymore. I came back just
Uh,
as Christ did. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
you
Anyway,
you came back, so should we be
mhm.
scared? Are we ready for the zombie apocalypse? I'm not really sure we're actually ready for that.
I hope so. Everybody should be. Everybody should have a bug out bag. I think it's imperative that it should be a mandatory thing in everybody's household.
If the zombie apocalypse happens, I don't think a bug out bag is going to help anybody. It's just going to prolong the agony for about 3 days. So,
You might
yeah,
be right. Yeah.
nice try
Three
though. Nice
days.
try. Okay, and we will welcome now our newest guest, Leanne. It's Leanne, right?
Leanne, yes.
Welcome, Leanne. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. It's actually morning for me. It's 1:35 in the UK. So,
Oh, wow.
It's early morning, early
early
morning.
morning.
We'll try not to ask you too many taxing questions, but as our resident, I'm going to call you our resident expert. You may get some things thrown at you that may be a little difficult for 1 o'clock in the morning. So just tell me if it
Oh
gets
no,
too.
I'm fine. Trust me. I'm raring to go.
All right,
Hmm.
awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna open the show with a single question, and then I'm gonna ask Tori first, then Kinte, then Leanne to answer. First of all, do you think that there are real connections between movies and a change in society? And by that, let me stipulate, what I'm thinking is, what kind of films do you think actually change the way that we behave about a certain subject? And then I will say sort of what I was thinking about it. So, Tori,
Oh
what do you
yeah.
think
Oh,
first?
good. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'll just say what movie I had because it kind of goes along with this question. I chose
Okay.
Philadelphia
Oh, okay.
because because it brought to light gay gay diseases and AIDS, and like it opened the gateways for a lot of conversations and a lot of legislations to happen. So I feel like it's a really good movie to show social change coming from a movie, because for a long time nobody was really aware about what AIDS really was, and the impact it had on people's lives, especially gay people's lives. And I really think that, like, society now has a backbone because of that movie, like the gay community and all that stuff. I think that that really started the whole gay awareness thing in America, which was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. It was a
Okay.
sad story, super sad, but yeah.
Well,
Okay. What about you, Kinte?
just to add on to that, Tom Hanks said that his favorite love interest was Antonio Banderas.
Oh
Um,
yes.
so you take that for what it
How
is.
can you say no to Antonio?
Right, right. Um, I'll say a movie that I freaking hate, but it made a huge impact, and that movie is What's Love Got to Do with It. I'm not saying before What's Love Got to Do with It came out, it was all right to beat your wife, but
Hmm.
definitely afterwards, the awareness of domestic violence went up a lot, and it made it definitely shift from you know the way that people view domestic violence definitely changed because of that movie. I mean, hardcore, full stop. After that movie, there was like zero tolerance for it after that. I'm not saying it got rid of it or anything, but it definitely
Right.
changed the awareness after that film. And
Okay.
although the performances were great, that's a movie that I saw once. I didn't need to see it again.
Oh yeah, I got a list of those. Boy, that's a good one. I think that that is a good one. And what about you, Leon?
Um, it's not the movie that I chose, but just based on the question. But I do want to say to Tori, yeah, I remember that movie, Philadelphia. I remember that movie well, but there was also another one called And the Band Plays On that really brought a lot of AIDS awareness and how AIDS could have been contained, but the CDC didn't do what they were supposed to do. And so yeah, that's a really provocative question. But I would say off the top of my head, the first thing that came to mind was the movie Love Jones, and I really liked that movie because it was a love story um, that had an all black cast, but it wasn't a black story, so it could have been anybody playing that role, but it kind of displayed a black relationship in a different light without any stereotypes. And I found that to be very refreshing when that came out. And I think it gave a new, refreshing perspective on a black love story.
So, well, I mean, I guess I'll say the movie that I chose, but this is where I had my, kind of breakdown of really thinking about this. I chose the movie Silkwood, which was basically about a whistleblower at a nuclear. They, they worked at a nuclear plant, and what they brought forward in the movie, which people didn't know, and this is where things get complicated. What they brought forward in the movie was the whistleblower herself. She basically died. She died of radiation poisoning, and the reason that people wouldn't listen to her had a lot to do with, one, she was a woman, but two, there were a lot of rules inside of this place, and people did not want uh they didn't want the outside action groups to come in and regulate stuff. So it was a big deal. And it did change society in the sense that it gave us a set of information pieces, data points, if you will, to think about how we were treating people that were working inside of this industry. But here's where I started thinking, there's something else to this. Because I started thinking that, listen, if we are talking about the way that a movie behaves, or makes us behave, I should say, in a way that is different from when we walk into the theater to
Mhm.
when we walk out of the theater, then I would have to add Jaws. because Jaws changed the way that people saw the ocean. And I'm not saying that people didn't know that there were sharks, but we personified the shark in this one and we made it like the monster. And we've done that with a bunch of movies where our societal reaction to something changes because of a film. But is that really societal change? And or is that just, this is our knee jerk reaction? And I really had to think about this a bit because then I started thinking, well, some of the movies that we all think about as, yeah, it brought on some kind of social change. Is that just a reaction to stuff that's already happening? Or is it like an organic movement based on the film itself? And I don't know if I actually have a good answer, so I'll open it up to you guys. What do you think is like, first of all, let me ask it this way. What do you think the role of movies in society is? Obviously, the biggest one is to entertain us because that's what we go to the movies for. But do you think that there is a role for movies to act as pivot points, intersections, real places where we can get a divergence from here's what we're thinking to here's what we should be thinking? And I'll just open it up to any of you. What do you think?
I think a movie is post is number one thing is to entertain, right?
Right.
But there's also you want to inform as well. But if you don't do the entertainment part, it doesn't matter how much information you have because it'll be lost on deaf ears. And I think a movie that does both very well is the most effective. So because all what this is supposed to be is entertainment, right? And I guess people are entertained in different ways. But I think the most important thing is, are you learning something as well as being entertained? And I don't know that movies are by and large supposed to make you feel a certain way about society, but um, but I mean, there's sneaky ways that you can go ahead and do that.
So I was thinking about Super Size Me, right? And that was definitely a movie, and it was definitely entertaining. It was really actually hard to watch though, and it didn't come off necessarily as a documentary, but it was really right. It really had that feeling to it. Um, and that kind of thing, I think, does change the way that we think about things that we wouldn't normally have uncovered on our own or that take a lot longer. Sometimes we can be entertained into knowledge. Uh, let's, Leon, what
Can I
do you
say
think?
one? Can I
Yeah,
ask one more question? And then I'm
yeah,
sorry, just for clarification. When we're
sure.
talking about, are we talking about scripted films? Because I feel like documentary should be put in another category.
Yeah,
Because that's kind of the express purpose of most documentaries.
yeah, and that's why I said that I think Super Size Me wasn't specifically. That's why I wouldn't use it as an example of like our movies for movie potluck because we definitely are talking about movies that are scripted in
Okay.
a way that and I don't because otherwise I would have added Al Gore's movie and said, well, I mean that has had a huge impact on everything. Um I mean, people still point to that movie as being sort of a catalyst for a lot of change. But that is far more documentary in style and not it isn't entertainment focused. I'm talking about movies that entertain us first, and that's why I brought that piece up. And then secondly, like you said, give us some kind of information or a way to rethink things. I'm going to bring up one more movie. Well, I'm going to bring up a lot of movies, but there was a movie back in the 70s or early 80s. I don't remember which, but it was called Brubaker, and it was starred Robert Redford, and it was about Robert Redford going into a prison in the South, and he was trying to move forward prison reform. And the way that he did it was he went into the prison undercover first as a prisoner, saw how they were treated, and then tried to be a warden that would be able to basically change the system from the inside. He didn't. I mean, eventually it was still the same old, same old. By the end, you realize that he did have an effect, but it didn't change things. Um, and I was really struck by that movie, but did it actually change our world? No, it didn't. I do feel like it added a sense of awareness into our culture about prison reform and at the time what they were thinking of in terms of how violent things were and how out of control they were, but it didn't really change the world, so to speak. But let me ask Leanne, what do you think the role of movies in society is?
Well, that's what I've been thinking throughout what you were saying. I don't think movies evoke change. I don't think they do that. I think what movies do is bring awareness to an issue in society. It makes people aware of what's going on, but I don't think change comes from that awareness, um, not directly related to the film. So the movie that I did pick for this evening is Joker, because I really think that film brought awareness to lots of things.
Hmm.
Um, his performance was phenomenal. But what we learned about mental health and the system, and uh, it was profound. So I think that films are very successful, or can. And another movie that I really liked was Don't Look Up, that just came out with Leonardo DiCaprio. These movies, they make us take a look at ourselves and how we interact with one another, and how so I guess from that aspect it can change, because if you can change your perspective of humanity itself, then that is change. But um yeah, it's I wouldn't want to say though that films cause change.
So I had a take on this, and my take was, and this was part of my whole, okay, what I thought I was going to talk about is not what I actually want to talk about. There have been movies over the course of my lifetime, and I mean, I have seen thousands and thousands and thousands of movies, and some movies have had profound impact on me, and they have changed me and made me want to either go out into the world and do something with that experience, or they have created in me this like insatiable thirst to find out more about whatever it is. And sometimes it is purely innocuous. You know, some small thing in a movie will lead to some huge revelation for me personally. And I think that's the key and core to understanding how things can change society, because everything in society changes from the individual perspective out, right? Whether it's whether I mean, and we're talking about society in the West, just to be clear. We're definitely not talking about Asian society or any place where the I isn't sort of at the center of everything, but as the center of in our culture, the I, when you experience something that makes you want to make the world a better place or makes you want to change things, that can, I think, spark a revolution, if you will. Um, I, I say this though, and now I'll open up the question again. I'm a little bit conflicted about how movies change us, and then how much of that is just, like I said before, a bit of a knee jerk reaction to what we're already experiencing in society. And then we're all of a sudden just sort of kickstarted, propelled into action because of. Um, I don't, you know, I'm saying this sort of like as a, I have an interesting feeling about this, but it's because I haven't experienced it, right? I saw the movie Fruitvale Station, and I was just changed by that movie forever. I had not understood on such a visceral level the kind of interactions and dynamic that was going on between the characters, and then what that looked like in actual society. And it made me refocus and change a lot of my thinking. um I mean, it's hard to express like how a movie can change your perspective on things. But that particular one really did make me want to do things. It made me want to be more activist, right? So my question to you guys is, what kind of movies do you feel like bring that out in you? Or have you seen a movie that has made you want to change the world, and how? So I'll
Yeah,
start with, go ahead, Tori.
I will say that Aaron Brockovich really motivated me for many reasons
Oh, good
because
one.
she was a single mom, she was in an abusive situation, she came from nothing, and
Right.
she solved this multi-billion-dollar lawsuit. That's very inspirational. That's very anybody can achieve the American dream. It doesn't you don't have to come for money, like, and you don't have to come from the projects either. Like, you can be like, in the middle, and and she's a woman. And when she did this, this is very groundbreaking in itself. So I thought that Julia Roberts did a really good depiction of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. What about you, Kinte?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry. You kind of
Uh,
went in and
I,
out.
I said, what about you? What movie or what movies do you think changed the way that you feel about the world, or made you want to act on something?
Um, I don't know if there was a particular movie that made me feel like that. I mean, I've been inspired by movies. I come from an activist family and an activist background, so I was already there. But movies like I would say a movie like Malcolm X uh, was very inspiring. Um, you know, I think that movie is one of my favorite movies of all time, and just I'm inspired by the life of Malcolm X, and that movie did a great job of telling us who he was and what his life story was, and I think it was a catalyst for people to learn more about him. There was another movie that came out um, a couple of years ago called um, The Birth of a Nation,
Right.
and that was a great film as well. I'm not a big fan of slave films in general, but I love that one because it was about revolution and fighting and rebelling. And just to think back then that those people, going up against, an army, that they weren't supposed to be successful at, but they wanted freedom so bad that they were willing to lay their lives on the line. And unfortunately, many, lost their lives, but it was very inspiring. And I think that's a fantastic film. As a black person, African American person, it is, it's very hard to watch, but definitely it's a wonderful film. So in those regards, I think movies like that definitely are inspiring to me.
Okay. What about you, Leon?
Uh, so I don't think any film has moved me to that point. But I think all of this is subjective, and I think it's really important to point that out. And Kente kind of touched on that. Coming from a marginalized or disenfranchised population where we don't have the same types of representation in media and film, and so we don't see the same stories that represent ourselves equally. Most Black films are about slavery or, gang activity. We're just
Right.
now coming into an era of where we're able to see more diverse representations of our lives, but still trailing way far behind. So when you're talking about films about Aaron Brockovich, well, no, that's not going to really motivate me the same way as it would a white woman. So because we don't have the same representation in Hollywood, it's often hard to relate to these stories that others might find uplifting and life changing because we just haven't had that type of presence on the screen. So I just want to point that out that a lot of this is subjective, and at times can find myself struggling to say, well, I've never really felt that way about a film. I've been inspired, like Kente said, but and then there's been some stories that have really deeply touched me emotionally. You know, certain, I think Officer and a Gentleman for a long time was one of my favorite films ever, and just because of the type of story that unfolded through that. So I think I'm more appreciative of a great storytelling, a great script that evokes emotion from me rather than one that I find motivates me to go out here and change the world.
Can I? Oh,
My experiences that led me to become an advocate for Black women and a sociologist, those experiences are what motivated me to want to change the world. Certainly not a film, though.
Hmm.
can I make one more point to add on to what Leanne is saying? Um, White people, they're so fortunate they control the industry. So there's 19 million Viking movies about some goddamn Vikings. They got a movie coming out right now, and what's that one with William Wallace about the Scott
Braveheart.
Braveheart, and then they just totally rip off the West as if only white men were cowboys
Yeah,
and
exactly.
all of that kind of stuff. So you guys
So
get to sit
true.
there and enjoy these fanciful tales about how awesome you guys were, and to
Yeah.
make it seem like we weren't shit, which we know that's not true.
Right.
So Hollywood is a trip, and this is another conversation you can have about how Hollywood affects black people because um okay, if you're a young white boy, right?
Hmm.
Man, um James Bond is a white dude. Spider-Man's a white dude. Superman's a white dude. You know, you just go down the list. And then they make we get Black Panther, cool. That's funny.
Ant-Man.
we get Black Panther, and then you get some white dudes talking about, man, I don't like all this diversity. you know.
Oh,
Oh,
So
they have a
yeah.
meltdown. Don't forget when they were going to make Little Mermaid a black girl, and
yeah.
Yep.
see,
Or
and the
Captain
thing is,
Marvel with a
but
white woman.
you
Yeah.
James Bond, see, this is the problem. So they are having a meltdown because 007 is going to be a black woman, but the thing is, it's the agent's number.
Right.
She's not
Right.
going to be James Bond. She's
Right.
going to be 007. But like that racist mentality is so ingrained. They just
Oh,
can't think outside the box.
Mhm.
so I just started watching the show Bridgerton or Bridgington.
Bridgerton.
Yeah,
Bridgerton.
Bridgerton. And to me, and I am in no way, shape, or form racist, but like it was off putting to me at first to see Indians and blacks and dressed up in the 1800s. And it was just, it was, I wasn't used to it, you know? So I sat there like for a second, like, whoa, this is different. And I love it. I love how
But
they,
what was off-putting about it? Because black people did exist like that. Now, if
no,
I
you
was
want
I
to
just
get
gonna
know
say
off
that.
that.
put,
I
And
was
but
just gonna say
it
that.
wasn't like a negative. It wasn't like a
It,
negative aspect. It was
let
just like I wasn't used to it,
let
and
me
so
let
you
me
like
said
speak to that.
off-put though. You said
Let
yeah,
me
yeah.
speak
off-put.
to that.
That was a wrong like word to use. It was
But
just
what
like
but the problem is, what the real problem is that history isn't told correctly because believe it or not, black people did exist during that time and dressed that way and look that way, but
yeah,
because it's not represented throughout history, again, we're talking about representation. When you see that image, it's startling because it's not been put into your psyche
That's right.
previously.
Look,
right.
So but they did exist back then and had money and looked like that, but they want to present us as slaves or indentured
And
servants
that's
or
not
things
fair
like
to
that.
do it all. That's not fair to do it all. Like to
okay,
anybody.
let me interject something here. So first thing is, and I'm not diminishing the topic at all because this is part, I think, of why it is so difficult to pin down and why I was having such a hard time coming up with movies that create social change. It's because we are only looking, and again, I'm only talking about Hollywood, so we're only talking about the West, right? Because this is our culture. It's the culture of the West is different from the culture of the East. If we were going to go look at Korean films, we would see something quite a bit different than what we see here. But the problem, and I understand where you're coming from, Tori, is it's not that you don't expect to see multicultural and multiracial people in all different walks of life. It's that your entertainment, the storytellers that we have created a world that is actually far more fictional than any world really is, because it isn't multicultural and multiracial. That we don't exist in a world and never have. That is purely the storyteller's little tiny box that they are working in. And so when we tell stories of great import or great social change, we often, unless culture is the catalyst, we don't tell it multiculturally. And that is a huge problem in getting forward the story. So
Hmm.
when we're talking, I mean, we can't even talk about, and again, I'm not trying to diminish any of the topics here, but we can't even have regular conversations about should Thor be a woman when there is canon material for a Marvel character to be a woman. We can't even get that off the table, much less get into the deeper stuff that is so incredibly important for us to be able to tell. As a writer, the moment that you put something on the table that moves outside of the normal boxes, you meet headwinds. Every
Well,
time you meet
well,
headwinds.
I,
And
I
that
have to
shouldn't be the case.
I have to say Thor shouldn't be a woman because women are not good with hammers.
All right, Kente. You and I are going to step out.
So, I will have to tell you, over here in the UK, I don't know if it made it to America, but they did a short series. I think it was 4 episodes of Anne Boleyn, the story of Anne Boleyn,
Oh yeah, and they made her
Mhm.
and she
black,
was
right?
playing. you know, I had my reservations about that, but you know what? She owned it like a boss. She owned that role. She was so good
Yeah.
in it. So if you get a
Can I
chance
say
and you want to
something?
get really pissed off and shocked, go watch that one because it's really good.
But you know what? I have a problem with it. I'm gonna tell you why. Why when they make it black is someone gets beheaded? So, oh,
Oh,
spoiler
you know,
alert.
now, I mean, the only problem I would have with that is because historically she was a real person and obviously she was not black.
Not
So,
at all.
yeah, I can understand if people were a little upset about that, but I think it was proven a point because you have Hamilton
But so
on
what?
the other side of black people telling white history.
I just
There you
I have to I have to stop you for 1 second, right? I mean, okay, look, yeah, I get it. If you want to have the most authentic looking Abraham Lincoln because you're pulling his picture out of a portrait, fine. Then, make that a point. But if you are just telling a story, I mean, I'm sorry, but it
right,
doesn't matter who the
right,
actor is as long as the actor is good. And, I mean, I do think that Hamilton actually brings that sort of full circle in the sense that n- it is difficult to find a white person anywhere that doesn't love Hamilton. And if they really thought about the irony of that, they would totally understand that Lin Manuel could be anybody, and the story would be just as strong. Sorry, Lin Manuel, I love you, but the story would be just as strong because it's the story that tells it, not just the outside piece. It bugs me to no end to hear people say, well, you can't have someone in any other racial makeup other than, English or Scottish play somebody as Othello or be King Lear. Or why?
Well, I'll say
I've
this.
never understood
I'll
that.
say this. If they make a movie about me, you better not have no white boy playing me.
No, no, Kinte, that's been arranged. I'm playing you.
Oh,
So,
okay. Well, then that's
yes,
all right.
yeah.
That's all
So
right.
it's all good. It's all
That's
good. I
okay.
gotcha. I
that's
gotcha.
funny.
So I'm going to throw out another question here. What do you think in terms of how people react to and I mean, this again, this is part capitalism and it's part zeitgeist and it's part just sort of the way that our culture melts together. Before I say this, though, and before I ask, I'm going to make one single point, and that is prior to the 1990s, we did not have, obviously, the internet in the scope that we do now. So information and exchange of ideas was not quite as prevalent as it is. Well, prevalent isn't the right word. It wasn't quite as easy to exchange. It didn't move as fast as it does right now. And so it took a little time for things to gel. It took some time for, stuff to really fulminate. As a result of that, movies, I think, had a bigger part in how we understood our everyday lives. And I'll just say that, like, my ideal of a house, of a home, was very much affected by what I saw in the movies. The perfect home to me was something that basically came out of a movie. It was weird almost. But now, especially if you ask a Gen Z kid, man, they don't care. That it is not about the perfect place. It is about the perfect feeling. It is about being good inside of yourself. And I'm going to bring up a movie here and then ask you guys a question. So, we all watched the movie Encanto. I don't know if you guys all saw it, but we all saw the
We
movie
don't
Encanto.
speak about Encanto.
I'm sorry, we got to talk about this. Okay, so and this movie, like a lot of other movies, like Matchstick Men, like Rain Man, they dealt with mental illness, and not even mental illness, because autism isn't really mental illness. Um, they talked about the state of being, the state of mind that people have that's diverse in a way that was way different than we had been used to talking about it. And that, I think, actually was kind of a catalyst for some change. But here's where the question comes in. Do you think that there are lines that we should draw in terms of what we portray and what we don't portray? That is, are there lines that we shouldn't cross over when it comes to movies? And I'll say it this way: it's really great when we have progressive films, to me. It's great when we have progressive films, but I don't want to have any theater distribution of something that's promoting white nationalism, or let's go kill the Jews, or anything like that. I would actively stand in line to ban it. And I'm wondering if you think that, like, it how do we caveat that? How do we create those social boundary lines to make that happen? Or do we? How do we manage that? So I'm going to start with our resident awesome expert, Leanne. Tell us what you think.
I wish there was, but I don't think that there is. I saw on Netflix an Indian film called Balzab, or I keep thinking Beelzebub, but we know that's not the
Well,
name of it.
is that the immortal one, the one that where the guy's immortal?
It's a woman,
Oh, it's a woman.
and there is a horrific rape scene in it. Horrific. And there was no warning on
Mm,
Netflix. It was 15 plus. And I'm just so glad my daughter's 18 now, but I'm just really thankful that she was not watching the film with me when I was watching it. Um to me, it was lauded as a brilliant film, and I thought,
mm,
did we watch the same thing? Were we looking at the same film? So again, I think it's subjective. I think that film should have never ever been put on Netflix ever, with any kind of rating. um I don't know how we will ever agree to that, because I just don't, because money make, they want to make money, and shock
right,
value makes money. And
right.
so I don't think that that will ever happen, because then you've got the free speech, and this is art, and blah 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 blah. So I don't think we will ever meet in the middle on that one.
But
What are your thoughts, Kinte?
wait, I'm still tripping that your daughter's 18. I swear she was like in junior high last time we talked.
That's the
Golly.
older one. The older one is 27 now.
Oh my god.
Wow. I'm sorry. I'm
which is
when you
amazing
said
to me,
18,
seeing
yeah.
that I'm only 35 myself. I just don't know how that happened.
She was a baby having a baby.
Exactly. We grew up together, literally.
Same thing with me. I'm about to turn 30 next week.
Yeah.
For the manyth time. Yeah, same thing.
Cheers.
Well, I guess I'm the old person. I'm 45. So
Oh, okay.
on the but no,
Finally, I know how old you are.
oh, you
We'll
don't
drink
know?
to you. We're gonna drink to
Oh,
your
you
health
never told
later,
me.
Kente. We'll drink to your health.
Thank you, thank you.
All right.
Speaking as the elder statesman on the show, um, going back to the racial aspect of it is, as a black person, you really feel like there's certain things. See, I feel like as a black person, you have to be very careful in what you sign up for, what you put yourself into as an actor or as a writer or whatnot. We're not afforded the same kind of grace as our Caucasian brethren, so you can't just put any imagery out when it comes to um, us. So yeah, there are lines. Now there's I'm not saying that every black person depicted on TV or movie or film um, has to be like you know saints and all that, because that's not real. But I feel like there's a thing that I like to refer to as black misery porn,
Mm,
where
Huh?
it's
Mm.
just it's just they want to show black people in the most degrading
Suffering. The
suffering
suffering.
aspects of life, as if that's I mean, I'm not to toot my own horn, but I didn't grow up in that. I came from a very middle class family. I know
right.
tons of black people who the same way. We didn't all struggle and all of that kind of stuff. Not to say that I have people in my family who have, but they make it seem as if that's every black person's reality, and that's completely not true. And so sometimes when they do black misery porn, as I call it, um, there's a part where it makes my stomach turn. I'm not saying that you should never show black people who are not successful or whatever, but it just depends on to what end is it. So
Right.
so I really do feel like, and I've heard some actresses say, well, why is it when a white girl plays a prostitute, it's applauded, but when we do it, we get looked down on. It's like, well, because the white girls got a bunch of other things that they can look to say, to balance, not even balance it, but to drown it out. So when we do it, it carries a different kind of significance and a weight to it. So you have to be careful, I feel like, what you put out there. And then also you have you don't want to do anything that can harm a community, right? I feel like sometimes there's movies that I really question the intent of the author of it, where they do this kind of I hate to use this term, bro type thing, where it's like, okay, what is this? What's the whole purpose of this? What are you really trying to do with this? I mean, what is the social statement that you're trying to make? Whereas, are you trying to inflame people who are who have issues with people of color, women, gay people, whoever, you know.
Right.
And I feel like I know censorship is like a bad word, especially I'm a creative person and I make content. No one wants to be censored, but you know what? Some things needs to be censored. I know that's gonna get me shot at by a lot of my friends who make content, but I feel like there needs to be boundaries. But I mean, it's hard to decide where the boundaries are. I'm not going to act like that's easy, but I know people say you could just turn it off, but then it's still out there in the world and it affects. So
That
mhm.
that is the exact point of this podcast. Our episode tonight is really this is why it is important, and I circle back to, no pun intended here. I circle back to Jaws, because what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to make a false equivalency here, but there is sort of this is the metaphor that I can think of that actually makes people see what it is that I'm trying to say. That is, the movies affect us. It's not just that we affect the movies. Yes, we are all the people that, if we demand content, we can get content, right? So we want to see stuff. Hopefully content creators respond with, yeah, okay, you want to see sword and sandals, I'll throw you some gladiator, whatever it is, right? But the converse is true too. That is, movies have a direct impact on how we behave socially. From a capitalist standpoint, everybody goes out and buys Baby Yoda. Everybody goes out and, whatever, that point too.
Get leather
And then
jackets when
What
they
leather
about
saw Shaft.
jackets.
Remember Shaft?
what about a
Yep.
movie like Mean Girls? Because Mean Girls had a very big impact on the social aspect of high school and how
That
women,
too.
like interacted with each other.
The,
Tori, you were mean way before Mean Girls. What you talking about?
I
But
Yes.
I
I
think
think what I'm
if
saying
I could
is
just
that
add on to what Kente was saying is just one little thing I want to add on to that that he's saying, but kind of out the back door is that the difference is when society sees these repeated images of black people in these negative connotations. Unfortunately, society is structured that our whole entire race is based on the actions or representations of a few. And white people don't have that to contend with. So if you
right.
continuously see images of black people being oppressed in black trauma porn and escaping from slavery from the kindness of the white savior master, or in gangs, then white supremacy dictates that that's how society sees all of black people. So I take
And I
for example, I'm sorry, I'll just say this one thing. Um, you have the Bill Cosby family on television, which are the high end black people that are the elite of the elite, and then you've got Good Times, where Florida and James can't get out of the gutter no matter how hard they try. But you
right.
know what? The majority of black people are like right in the middle of that. And
Right.
that
Right.
is the element of where we are able to see white situations in middle class, but we don't see black situations in middle class. So now I'll
So
sit back and just be quiet and sip my wine.
I, you don't have to be quiet.
Right.
So this also is, I think, what we were alluding to before, which is as an example, as another example of this, right? Rape culture is an actual thing. It exists,
Yes.
and no matter how much you try to say it doesn't matter whether we show this in movies or whether we write about it in books, and to a degree, I get it. I understand that this can be an elemental aspect of art, of, well, maybe of art is too broad, but I understand why it can be elemental in the aspect of storytelling. I totally get that, right? But the problem is in the way that it is portrayed, because when it is portrayed as something that happens every day and it's just the norm and there is no sort of filter for it, then that's when it becomes a problem, because then it becomes, look, all of our movies basically are us looking in the mirror. This is what we find acceptable, until we say no. No, it's not acceptable. So the pushback sometimes, I think, can be, it will feel like it's out of place, even though it's not out of place. I mean, I go back to Brokeback Mountain a lot, and I think about the number of people that were just absolutely incensed by Brokeback Mountain. Oh my God, how dare they show something like that? And now Brokeback Mountain seems tame. It seems tame because we have a decade almost of, well, actually more than a decade of time that has filled in that space, and we have changed. Our society has changed. Now, again, I'm not making any one to one sort of comparisons here, because one of these topics is far deeper and far greater in terms of misrepresentation
Mhm.
and also just basic human decency, right? But I think that in order for people who want to understand it, sometimes pulling this out a little bit and saying, listen, if you were experiencing this, trust me, you wouldn't want this to be. If every time you turned on the TV, there was no one that looked like you, representing all the things that you do, that would be terrible. On the other side of that, I think we also, movies can act as as equalizers. Movies can bring us forward into more progressive thinking. It's not always, but it is
I
sometimes.
think Disney does a lot of good progressive thinking movies at the time.
Recently, recently,
Recently, yeah.
Recently,
I mean,
recently,
I'm not
they
talking
were
about like
the
old Disney. I'm
yeah
talking about like
they were the
Pixar movies.
godfathers of the effed up part of Hollywood.
that
Yeah, they
yeah,
were. They
And God
were.
yeah.
forbid if you
The
were a child
animated
whose
part of it,
mother
but like the
died. Why does
Right.
Pixar
every
movies are
mother
pretty
in
well
Disney
done.
Every
have to die?
yeah. What is that?
Well,
Yeah.
we're just speaking of Disney because we're running short on time here. But speaking of Disney, right? I saw a great article with some of the people, some of the execs at Disney, that were talking about how they understand that our society is changing. And it's not just changing peripherally, it's not just on the edge. It's that the representation that they need to have with trans, queer, the interracial, intercultural, who we are as a nation, not just who we think we are as a nation, or who the nation thinks it is as a nation, I should say. That is really important to them. They understand now,
Oh,
and
they're
I'm
full of
saying
shit.
that, and well, I'm
This is
saying
full
that
of shit.
because the bottom line is always money. It's money. It's so if something is going to make money, Freeform as a channel didn't come out of nowhere. It came from Disney's direct want to tap into a market, and they didn't have any content to tap into that market. Now, again, this is not to say that there's any accolades that get to be put on anybody's shoulders for being forward thinking. I'm saying that sometimes we, as the viewers, we as the demanders of content, can change how storytellers tell stories simply by, first of all of us can become content creators. Every single person out there needs to go write a script right now. No, I'm just joking. um
Mhm.
but when you are in the position, you have to you've got that's just the bottom line, is you're not going to make money until you start listening. I think we're heading in a different direction. I don't think that it's going to be a fast corner, but I do see the slow bend of progress happening. It's again, I wish that it was
I,
faster, but
I'll
it's
say
I just
this.
think that,
Okay.
this Will Smith, I mean, he's like what, the fifth actor in the history of the Academy to win a Best Oscar. And, the one black Disney character that was a princess, she was in love with a frog who was a deadbeat. I mean, I'm not buying it.
well
Yeah.
that okay. Okay, that was 20 years ago though, and I would just challenge you a little bit to look at Disney content over the past, let's say, five
But there
years
hasn't been another
and tell
black
me
princess since
what you
then.
see.
and I and
Yeah,
I and
that's a good
honestly
point. That's a good
and
point.
honestly, I I I feel this kind of way. Taking a white character and making them black, I'm not a fan of that. Uh,
Yeah, me
I'm
neither.
I'm more of a I want to create an IP that exists, that you can look and see that this is who it is. I don't think that's progress. And then I
Right.
think by making the princess black and then the prince like some white guy, I don't think that is a great thing either. So it's
Well,
like
the trope is
why can't why is it that what black people can't be together?
well,
The
the
prince and the
trope
prince.
is the trope, right? So what
Mhm.
we need to do is we need to start developing tropes that are outside of the standard comfort zone. These are,
Mhm.
and we need to create new tropes, basically. And that's why I say that it's a slow bend and not a fast corner. We really
Well, Jen,
this
I
is
don't want to be
just stuff.
disrespectful, but you're saying we, but you're coming from a place that, don't you think black people have been pushing back for the past 200 years? I mean, we're
I
not
do.
complacent. No, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we're not complacent with the things the way that they are. We don't sit back. We make our voices heard, but change comes from power, a position of power, and representation. And we have
Oh,
neither of those
I
in
see what you're
Hollywood.
saying. I see what you're saying, and what I think what I was speaking to was we when I say content creators, people that are in the position of having that power. I am absolutely, I know that I come from a position of privilege, and I know that that privilege was by no means, I didn't earn it. I didn't get it by just by definition. I did nothing to get that. But that doesn't mean that I can't act on that privilege to use it for something more powerful
Absolutely.
than what it was, even the people that gave it to me in the past never could have intended. So I totally understand what you're saying. I
You
actually really do.
you know what I really kind of want to happen?
What's
I
Mm-hmm.
that?
kind of want us to never get a foothold in Hollywood, so that it'll force black people to create their own thing, because that's what they really will respect. Like, they respect Bollywood because they do it on their own and it's successful. They
That's a
even
good
have
point.
this thing called Nollywood, the Nigerian Hollywood. That thing
Yeah,
is big.
yeah, it
And
really is.
you
Yeah.
know, so I'm like this. Somebody said this to me a long time ago. Don't wait for a green light. Be your own green light. And sometimes, see, this is the thing that I think black people need to understand is every couple of years they give you an Oscar so they can keep this illusion up that you're really part of the system. So they don't want you to start your own Hollywood where you create your own stuff. Like, I think one of the biggest mistakes Hollywood made was not buying Medea, right? Like, people don't know this, and I was just talking about this yesterday. I did a lecture yesterday, and like, Tyler Perry did plays first, right? And then
Yes.
what happened was he was trying to give Medea, that's his signature character, to Hollywood, and Hollywood was like, nope, we don't want this crap.
Yep.
So he was forced to bet on himself. So he didn't give it away. He actually controlled it, put his own money in there, and now this brother's a billionaire. So
Yep.
they said, you know what? We don't want that no more. We don't want a bunch of billionaire, like, people control, owning their own studios like Tyler Perry. So if you notice, after Tyler Perry, man, all them black content creators that can generate content was getting bought up. Issa Rae, Donald Glover, my brother who did
Peel.
Peel, the brother who
Hmm.
did oh my god, I
Shonda
love this guy,
Rhimes.
Chandra Rhimes. They all got
Hmm.
deals because they don't want. What if they decided to say no? We're gonna start our own thing. That's more scarier than them being a part of this system where they can control it. Yeah, they'll give you some money, but you're still under their thumb. Look at Will Smith. I'm not gonna talk about the slap. Will Smith, I seen him in an interview like a couple of years ago where he was talking about waiting for Hollywood to allow him to
Hmm.
do something. I'm sitting there like, you
Hmm.
worth $400 million.
Hmm.
Do your, you can, and people will work with you. I mean, they would then. They would work with you. I mean, they still would. Um, use your power. Like, they don't use their power. So, and I feel like I've talked to like a lot of Canadian actors. I've done a lot of interviews, and I know Leanne has done interviews with some of the similar people. And one thing I've heard from them is they're like, when we're not in between jobs, we come together and we start creating our own content.
Hmm.
We're not waiting for Hollywood to call or whatever. And
Right.
I think that all these groups, should do that. Is instead of waiting for this system to be kind to you when they have no benefit to them to empower you. In
Right.
fact, their benefit, that's why I don't believe it's never going to really change. It's going to be a little bit of change because there's been periods in Hollywood where it looked like it was black season, and then all of a sudden it goes right back. Look, remember UPN and CW?
Oh
Hmm.
yeah.
They used to
Yep.
call UPN Us Po Negroes, and what they called it was before it was the CW,
Hmm.
WB, We Black.
Oh, the WB. That's right.
you know they use black content to build it up, and then it got lily white.
Yeah.
Yep.
Look at Fox.
Well,
Remember Fox when Fox started? Fox
Yep.
started yeah, they had Married with Children, but they had Living Color. It was nothing but black stuff, and then
That's true.
man, you don't find nothing in black on. The only thing you find black on Fox now is the
When
football
it
on
fades
Sunday.
to black. No, when it
Right.
fades to
when
black.
it
Oh
fades
yeah,
to
right,
black.
right. So, but
So
I've loved this conversation, and I'm so sorry. I hate that I have to go, but if please do a part two to this because this is a great conversation. Is um that you can make change in film. You can make differences, like in just an ad campaign. Remember, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Uh, you know, Click It or Ticket. You can make really big changes with it. Look at the gay community. 5, 10 years ago, people freely use the F word. You know, it was like now your tongue explodes before you even would think to use, it, especially publicly, right? And a lot of that was Will and Grace, right?
Right.
Will and Grace. You look at all the different TV shows; they basically gangstered, like you going to, treat us a certain way, and that was a lot of it was done through Hollywood.
Yeah.
Hollywood was what did it, so it can definitely be done, and that's why, like getting sexism. There's how many movies? Excuse me. Back in the day, they had the movie 9 to 5. I don't know if y'all remember that one.
Yeah, with
Oh,
Dolly Parton.
absolutely.
Yeah, that movie was huge. That movie
Yep.
changed a lot. I hope I didn't take somebody's film, but that movie was a huge movie that changed a lot. Before that, I'm not saying it was. I mean, well, no, it was actually nobody even thought about sexual harassment on the workplace, and yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna preface this by saying that part of the reason to do this podcast in particular
Hmm.
is that it's not that people don't know that these changes either need to be incorporated into society or that they aren't on the verge.
Hmm.
It's that sometimes movies can propel us into whatever is next based on what we see as the problem. So you make a good movie about something that is a problem in society, and suddenly thousands and thousands of people who didn't understand the problem because they can't see it because it's not in their own lives recognize that it's a problem. Now, I'm not talking about stuff that is like, yeah, we've got some societal issues that just don't go away. And those issues, they take a lot more than just, whimsically saying, hey, we just need some new content. I get that, but there are ways that I think we can at least propel things in a different direction, especially when we're talking about how to be more progressive in our own thinking. So we're coming to the end of our podcast, and I gotta say,
I'm
this
so
has been,
sorry. I have to go.
go
This,
ahead, Kinte.
but
It's been a pleasure. Thank
love
you
you
very
guys.
much for being a
Love
part of
you
Great,
this.
Bye.
great,
too.
awesome show. I'm gonna check out the finish it on the replay.
Okay.
Okay. I this is the movie potluck, and at the movie potluck, we always are talking about food, even when we're not talking about food.
Hmm.
And as a matter of fact, just so that we can really appreciate how deeply food and social change and the effects of maybe not wanting to see social change, I just read an article a couple of days ago about Kirk Douglas and Spartacus, and how in that movie there is a scene that didn't get into the final cut, has been restored into the movie, and it deals with Crassus, who, or not Crassus, I'm sorry, Lucius, the the person who is basically like at odds with Spartacus throughout the movie, and he has a slave basically, and this person is, he's a young guy. He's also Roman, and I totally forgot his name. I think it's Antonio. They have a conversation in the bath, and the bath is, it's definitely an erotic scene. It's not over the top, but it's erotic enough. And they talk about oysters and snails, and he says specifically, "Do you like oysters?" Or
I
do you like
do.
snails? And the conversation, he's basically, he says this. He says, "I like both." And that the metaphor in there for
I
him coming
get
out
it.
as being bisexual was just
Yes,
absolutely,
I get
and
it.
that was so far ahead of its time. But think about how much somebody must
Yeah.
have fought to keep that out of the movie, because you will, you'll smart the sensibilities of the average person, they won't want to come see it. Now that has changed so dramatically. I mean, that's like night and day now. Now
Yeah.
that would be in a sitcom. We could actually hear that dialogue and go,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good dialogue.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you
Well, also,
what
they might not have even understood it back then. They might not even understood the connotation there.
that also is true. That also is true. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you what movie, or not what movie. I'm gonna tell you what food I made for the blog this week. Food that I made for the blog was a let them eat cake. I actually love Marie Antoinette, and not as a hero, but because I love that story and I love the idea of the revolution as a part of, yeah, this is what exactly what we're talking about. So my let it eat cake is basically the story that comes from the movie that comes from the Marie Antoinette movie, and I feel like that is my best foot forward in here's some real social good stuff to sink your teeth into. So I'm going to ask Leanne and Tori, did you guys think about food, and what was your food for your
Oh, yes,
movies?
we did. I
All
did.
right, go for
Tori,
it.
do you
Tell
want to
me.
go first?
Sure. So Philadelphia is kind of a sad story, and there really wasn't much food involved in it. So I kept thinking about him being sick, and what makes you feel better when you're sick is some chicken noodle soup. So I'm bringing some homemade chicken noodle soup.
Oh,
I, I
wow.
I like that. That's very good. Very good.
Well, not only did I come with a meal, I came with pictures too. I don't know if they're floating around out there, but my film was The Joker. And so it was such a rich, dark, meaty character that I came with a rare steak
Mm.
with beets as a side dish and purple sweet potato, mashed purple sweet potato.
Mm.
And to wash it all down with a bottle of red Cabernet Sauvignon. My favorite bottle, Casiera del Diablo, which
Ooh.
is suitable for the devil joker to wash it all down with. So
I
I brought my food
absolutely love
with
it.
me.
That was epic. That was absolutely epic.
As a first for the movie Potluck, it was great. That was great.
You I want to remind everyone as they are thinking about this topic, because next week's topic is definitely going to be a bit more whimsical. Movies have a place not just in our culture, but movies have a place in our whole society. So, what we choose to consume as the movie audience says a lot about what we see in the mirror. And it's really important to keep thinking about that because we fuel what's happening. We can have, even if it's small, we can still have an impact on what we take into our brains, how we start thinking about this stuff, what we're meditating on, and it's important. I just wanted to throw that out there. So next week is actually my birthday week, and I hate saying that because it makes me sound entitled. But honestly, there's so many different people in my life right now that want to share that. That hey, we're just going to do something every night. So Thursday is the name of the show on Thursday is called I Sing the Movie Musical. It's a little bit of a take on a science fiction story that I love called I Sing the Body Electric, but because we're talking about the musical, I thought it sounded really good. I hope that you all can join us for that. I have some really interesting ideas about how we have formulated musicals and why they continue to be so incredibly successful. And I promise we will talk about Bruno next week. So, with that, I thank you all. Tori, how can we get you on social media?
You can get me every Friday night at my Facebook page, Tori Rush, and for my show called The Infectious Geek. We talk about all things nerdy, and this week we're talking about horror movies, our favorite, and what inspired us to watch the genre. And me and my friend Des started our own other podcast called um, Idle Talk with Des and Tori, and it's about marijuana mostly because it's legal in Virginia now. And
Nice.
yeah, and you can get me at Instagram at Rush Tory, Tory.
Very good. And Leanne, how can we find you on social media?
Um, I have really cut back on a lot of my social media for
Good
my
for
own
you.
sanity. But I am on Twitter, which is at Leanne Moonraven. But the best way to reach me, catch up on things that I'm doing, and take a look at my films and my audio theater network is leannemoonraven.com. It's all there.
Awesome. And you can find me at moviesandmeals.com. You can also catch me on my other guest here, Kinte's podcast for the pilot season. And
Me too.
this coming week,
I forgot about that one.
yeah, this coming week, we are actually doing Lost, which I feel like is going to be an
And
exciting.
Gilligan's
And
Island.
Gilligan's Island, yeah. I feel like this is going to be an exciting week. I'm sure we all have something to say about Lost and Gilligan's Island. So, with
Lost.
that, yeah, blast from the past.
Can I just point one thing out 1 second? So
Yeah.
I rewatched The Joker to prepare for this podcast, right? Because I just needed to see it again. And there's a humongous plot hole in that film that I didn't catch the first time. So next time you have me on, we'll talk about that plot hole.
Hey, that we actually have an
Hmm.
episode in my long list of episode titles that are about the unsung. We've done the sort of, here's the offbeat superhero, but I have a whole episode around the unsung villain. And
Mm.
I would love to have that as a part of that because I don't see Joker always as a villain. Actually see
Oh
him very
no.
differently.
Yeah,
So,
I do too.
especially with that movie. So, well,
Yeah,
we can definitely have that conversation. All right,
sounds good.
everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope you have a wonderful week and we'll see you next week.
All right. I'm out of here.